On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 50. The Senate being evenly divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative. The bill as amended is passed.
Morning glory and evening grace, America. The one big beautiful bill is over the Senate goal line. It is now passed the House. A version has now passed the Senate. The question before the chamber will now be, does the House simply take up the BBB and pass it? Or do they attempt to tweak it and send it back, which would be an extremely bad idea? I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening today. Let me begin by saying I want to thank to the 500 people who went over to their YouTube channel last night and signed and liked up for my Hugh Hewitt YouTube channel. I would like to do $500 people a day for the next month. Get to the 100,000, I'll leave you alone. But thank you. Today you're going to find over there an interview I just taped with Aviv Redegur of the Times of Israel, which I will be playing a little bit later in the program. You'll hear from my conversation with Brett Baer later in the hour and lots more. But let's focus on the biggest story. One big, beautiful bill is passed. That would make the Trump tax cuts permanent and many other things. Build the border wall, add massive detention facilities at the border, increase defense spending by $150 billion. I'm sure the defense industry did very well today. And we'll be talking with Energy Secretary Chris Wright about what the big, beautiful bill does for energy exploration and development in the United States today. But I want to begin by looking at the markets and seeing what they are saying about this. The market report is usually in the second hour, but I'm bringing it to you at the start of the day's program because the one big, beautiful bill passed and markets react. AmericanFederal.com sponsors the market report. AmericanFederal.com, run by Nick Grovich and his team. Buy and sell gold, silver, precious metals, and for the few of you that do it, collectibles. American Federal's been in the business 43 years. They are fabulous. They are the best in the business. They are completely transparent. Never had a complaint about them. Why? All they do is buy and sell with their commission the gold you want to buy or sell. And they do it in a straightforward, wonderful fashion, and they sponsor the market update. So the one big, beautiful bill passed the Senate earlier today, and at this hour, the Dow Industrial are up 1%, the S&P is down 0.12%, and the NASDAQ is down 0.86%. Gold is having a banger of a day. It's up more than 1% at $3,550 an ounce. That's up $42 an ounce, and I think that's just because they believe Jerome Powell is going to lower interest rates in July. He made a sort of cryptic hint about that today, and that might mean some additional pressure on inflation. I don't think so. I think we're going to the moon with the expensing provisions, the tax cuts being made permanent. I think people are going to invest in America. I think this is great. Why did the NASDAQ go down 0.86 points at this hour? Very simply, Ted Cruz had included a preemption provision in the one big, beautiful bill that would, had it passed, prevent any other state in the union from passing any law having to do with the development and deployment of artificial intelligence. And the Cruz bill had everyone from big tech behind it because they don't want the states screwing around with their AI development. Well, it got stripped out. Marsha Blackburn and a number of Republicans were not easy with the idea of a 10-year runway for AI without any checks and balances from the states. And so it got stripped out, and I imagine a lot of people in the AI world, tech-heavy NASDAQ, were counting on that 10-year law-free zone, regulation-free zone. Only the feds can regulate free zone. And it's gone. Like mist in the morning, it's gone, and therefore they're feeling a little depressed. So NASDAQ is down, but the Dow, which is the big gauge of American productivity, is up 1%. Donald Trump at the Alligator Alcatraz, more on that coming up, presser today was asked about the one big, beautiful bill passing cut number 18.
Oh, thank you. Wow. Thank you. I'm waiting, listening to these wonderful words, and they are music to my ears, but I was also wondering how we're doing, because I know this is prime time. It shows that I care about you, because I'm here, and I probably should be there, but we do care. Thank you very much.
That's good news. He's very happy. Then he went on to talk about Social Security cut number 19.
And just to be clear on the Medicaid cuts, you've promised not to cut Medicaid, said this is all just targeting waste, fraud, and abuse. Are you saying that the estimated 11.8 million people who could lose their health coverage, that is all waste, fraud, and abuse?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's going to be a very much smaller number than that, and that number will be waste, fraud, and abuse. And if you look, they took a much more liberal stance on the Medicaid situation than they could have. They had a tough stance and a weak stance. They took not a very strong stance on that to start off, and it's waste, fraud, and abuse, and everybody wants that covered.
What number is that? What analysis are you seeing?
I'm not seeing a number, but I know it's much less than the number you gave, and we really were very, very cognizant of three things. Social Security, we're going to take care of it beautifully. Medicare and Medicaid. And we are going to save it, whereas the Democrats are going to. You won't have it. They will destroy Medicare and Medicaid, and they have to because their numbers don't work. So it's not going to happen. They're the ones that have destroyed Medicare. They have made it so bad already, they're going to make it a lot worse. But now we'll be in charge, so we're going to have no problem with Medicaid or Medicare or Social Security. Thank you.
And the president keeps saying the same thing. He said the same thing since he came down the escalator 10 years ago. He's not going to touch entitlements. That will be for someone else to do, not Donald Trump. He also, though, went to the Alligator Alcatraz, a new detention center for illegal migrants built, I think, in the Everglades. And he was on the White House lawn before he departed for the Alligator Alcatraz, saying this, cut number 2.
Well, the Alligator Alcatraz is the idea that if some illegal immigrant escapes, they just get eaten by an alligator or a snake or something.
I guess that's the concept. This is not a nice business. I guess that's the concept. If the snakes are fast, but alligators are, but we're going to teach them how to run away from an alligator, okay? If they escape prison. How to run away. Don't run in a straight line. Run like this. And you know what? Your chances go up about 1%. Okay? Not a good thing.
I don't know why he knows that. It's interesting that the president knows how to avoid alligators. I wonder if there are alligators in the sand traps at Trump golf courses. There are on Hilton Head. The last time I played golf there, I hit so many balls in the creek. The alligators had a petition against me being there. He also had a comment about Democrats on the White House lawn today. Cut number 3.
The Republicans have their heart in it. The Democrats they just want to destroy our country. A Democrat wants to destroy the country. They won't vote on it. They don't vote on anything. This is the biggest tax cut in history. Everything is the biggest in history. It's the best bill we've ever had. We can't get one Democrat vote.
That he's right. They're not interested in tax relief. They want that tax hike. The House has got to stop it from happening. Now Donald Trump arrives in Florida and goes to the Alligator Alcatraz and is doing a walking tour with Governor DeSantis. Cut number 5, where he comments on who else might ought to come to Alligator Alcatraz.
Proud of it. Mr. President, Mr. Governor, what's your message to Governor Gavin Newsom inside of this facility?
Well, the first thing you should do is come here and learn something, because they don't do this. They don't know. They wouldn't know where to begin, and if they did, it would cost them 100 times more. So I would say he should call the governor and Christie, and I'm sure you'd give him because his state is a disaster, and he doesn't do this.
His state is a disaster, and he doesn't know how to do an Alligator Alcatraz. Donald Trump continuing on the tour, talking about what Joe Biden wanted for Donald Trump. Cut number 6.
I think our viewers at home should note that this is air-conditioned facility, so if any of the news claims are keeping them out in the hot, humid South Florida, that is wrong. It's probably 62 degrees here.
To be honest.
Or 72.
Hey, Biden wanted me in here, okay? He wanted me. It didn't work out that way, but he wanted me in here.
That I'm not sure what he said there at the end. Cut number 7, talking about Governor DeSantis, who's accompanying him on this tour. Cut number 7.
How would you describe the relationship, and what future does Governor DeSantis have?
I think it's a 10. Maybe 9-9, because there might be a couple of little wounds. So maybe it's not 9. I think we have a 10. We get along great.
They get along great. They get along fabulous. They get along extraordinarily well, and I'm happy for them. When I come back, I've got Noah Rothman to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill, as well as I've got a column in Fox News today about the amazing month that June was. June was one of the most amazing months of my life in terms of the good guys winning everywhere. And this is, of course, July 1, and we're going to count the first 3 days of July if we can get the one big, beautiful bill. But we haven't had a month like this in a very long time, not since maybe the Soviet Union fell apart and the Berlin Wall fell down in '89. This has been such a good week.
Go further toward the Vienna model. We'll have to go beyond the market. We can establish community land trusts to gradually buy up housing on the private market and convert it to community ownership. We can give tenants a right of first refusal to buy out their landlords when buildings go up for sale. And we can fully commit to a new era of social housing, ending subsidies for luxury housing development and using our wealth to build beautiful, high-quality social housing projects that offer good homes and strong communities to everyone. We won't decommodify housing overnight, but we know what we have to do, and we have history to guide us.
Luckily, I am here on the Hugh Hewitt Show with Noah Rothman, senior political writer for National Review, who can translate Mr. Mamdani for me because Noah is from New Jersey, so he speaks Mamdani. What exactly was he saying there, Noah?
I don't know if I can consult my New Jersey. I think I have to go back a little bit further and consult my Bolshevism. Decommodify housing suggests that property should be a communal right. It should be owned by the state. And you will have the luxury of leasing that property, I suppose, from the state, if you were so fortunate. And presumably, just based on what we understand public housing to be historically, I can't imagine that you would be privy to some, real luxury flats there. You're probably going to be getting access to, if you're fortunate enough and well placed enough, and maybe have a child, for example, who's attached to the commissars, then you might actually be able to get access to a flat between 1 and 3 years' time, presuming that you've got your paperwork in order. This is the future that Mr. Mamdani has envisioned for us in New York City and the surrounding area. It's going to be great for the GOP. It's going to be terrible for those of us in and around the metro. But you gotta admire at least how eager the Democrats are to ratify all the Republican Party's arguments.
My sister-in-law went to Bowdoin College, and so did Mr. Mamdani. So I like to poke her a little bit about, do they teach economics at Bowdoin? Apparently not. Do you think he's actually going to win, or will the maybe Eric Adams isn't so bad after all coalition come together?
I mean, my predictions are as good as the paper they're not written on, so don't bank on it. But yeah, I think he's got the inside lane. The nominee for the New York City mayor, a Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City, already starts with a leg up. It's a one-party town. Eric Adams is not a very great avatar for the anti-Mamdani movement. People outside the city may not know how impossibly weird the guy is. He's not an effective communicator. He has a bad habit of alienating his own allies. And he's got a lot of baggage, including the pardon that he got from the Trump administration. I hate to tell you, the Trump administration is not popular inside New York City, and the degree to which Eric Adams seems to be working alongside, hand in glove, with the Trump administration, that doesn't help him. To say nothing of the fact that Curtis Sliwa and possibly Andrew Cuomo will remain in the race. All of them perceive themselves to be the one true anti-Mamdani candidate. They're all likely to split up the vote.
If Cuomo gets in, then it's over, and Mamdani is your mayor. Curtis, I've known forever. We were colleagues for a while. Wonderful man. Doesn't have a prayer. I hope he does what's right in the best interest of the city. But I really don't think people understand how bad New York could become. Do you think they do, Noah? What could happen with a communist mayor?
No, I don't think so. I don't have myself. I'm 43 years old. I don't have any living memory of the archipelago of Needle Parks. Of the squalor and degradation, of the Bronx burning. All that stuff is distant memory to me. It's the sort of thing that I have to read about. People who are a little bit older than me might, but they don't seem to care. Mr. Mamdani did very well among older voters in New York City, a lot of whom probably see in him echoes of the protest movements of the 1960s and 1970s. Those are echoes that Mamdani himself is consciously courting, consciously attempting to summon up with his reminiscences about 1960s, 1970s radicalism, including socialist revolutionaries, including Cuban revolutionaries, including Black Liberation Army figures.
Including townhouses blowing up in Greenwich Village. Remember, there
Yeah,
were
the Weather
townhouses that
Underground.
blew up in Greenwich Village.
Sure, the Weather Underground types and liberationist movements. I haven't seen him praise the FALN, but I'm sure that's probably out there too.
Yeah.
Just any collection of radicals, militant radicals who are on the far left end of the spectrum, not progressive, socialistic, to the degree that we're even verging on Marxist. That's who this guy looks up to and aspires to. He's very open about it, very clear about what his program is, and it very much resembles not social democracy of the Scandinavian variety, but something more to the left of that. It's a real throwback, and it's a sort of thing that if you're nostalgic for that sort of period, which I think a lot of folks on the Upper West Side may be, this is your guy. But yeah, a lot of people don't remember how bad it got, and unfortunately, we need a reminder every generation or so. This may be it.
I lived in New York from March of 1980 till August of 1980, and that was it for me. Loved to visit it since then, but that was at its nadir. That was when it was dangerous to go to Times Square after dark. It was when the city was really caught in a vise of decline. I can't imagine New Yorkers want to go back there, but we will see. Let me turn to the one big beautiful bill, Noah. First of all, are you surprised that it passed the Senate? And second, do you think the House will pass it on a straight up or down vote as it exists, which is what I hope for?
Not surprised it passed. A little surprised that it took this long to get there, all the negotiating and horse trading. I don't know if the House will pass it in the form that it exists out of the Senate. I think there will probably be some revisions and tweaks to it still. But no, I'm not surprised it passed. It had to pass. The tax cuts could not be allowed to expire. Donald Trump could not be allowed to go throughout the entirety of this Congress without one major legislative achievement. And presidents tend to get at least one major legislative achievement, and this is it. I have a lot of problems with the bill as a conservative. I'm very frustrated with the degree to which it contributes to America's trajectory towards fiscal insolvency. But there is plenty of good stuff in here, and I would love to see the Republican Party defend it better, particularly the Medicaid cuts. Those cuts are getting demagogued to death. At the very last minute, the Senate added this $50 billion supplement for rural hospitals, which was a concern. Rural hospitals, they believed, would be underfunded as a result. But a lot of these cuts, the bulk of the savings that we derive from this comes from those Medicare cuts, and they are cuts to targeting individuals who are able-bodied, who should be in the workforce, who are recipients of welfare, who don't deserve it. They're being tested out. And this is the sort of thing that Republicans don't seem to have a spine enough willing to defend. It's eminently defensible. It's salutary. It's a healthy effort to purge the welfare rolls of individuals who don't belong there. This is not charity. This is taxpayer-funded largesse, and it should be stewarded properly. I think Republicans have
I think it will be
argued.
There. I think it will be argued effectively once they know what it is that they're arguing, and they had to get to the final bill. Last question, Noah. There's some pushback from fiscal hawks in the House. Shouldn't they just pass this and then move to a second reconciliation? Because the longer it takes for the tax cuts to be made permanent, the longer the economic stimulus is delayed and the more perilous November 2026 becomes.
Yeah, the political position is, I sympathize with that. I think the political position is in conflict with the principled position. And I think a lot of the conservatives holdouts in the House are deeply principled when it comes to America's fiscal problems. Look, and I sympathize with them too. They've been told again and again and again, yeah, just vote for this and we'll promise some cuts down the line. And we trust us. They're coming, and they're going to be really good. And that never happens. So the Chip Roy's
never happens, but it doesn't mean that they should want a huge tax hike to happen. And boy, if it doesn't get out of the House, we're in for a couple of rough months. Noah C. Rothman, follow him on X. I have a brand new sponsor, Americans for a Balanced Budget. They are running the website StopHealthCostHikes.com. StopHealthCostHikes.com. So it's health cost, plural, hikes.com. StopHealthCostHikes.com. What are they about? They're about making sure, this big win for the president today with one big beautiful bill, big win for the country, big win for the Republicans, big win for every taxpayer. Now they got to come back and do Reconciliation 2.0. And in Reconciliation 2.0, they have to take care of the premium tax credits that make health care affordable for people. They're going to get jammed wrongly about Medicaid cuts when, in fact, they are work requirements for people who are eligible for Medicaid. But premium tax credits are a feature of the healthcare system that allow people in the middle class to afford healthcare. Listen to pollster John McLaughlin talk about how when people are asked about premium health tax credits, they respond.
The Americans for Balanced Budget, we just did a survey because no one's addressing the healthcare marketplace that protects a lot of working class Americans who pay for their own insurance, may have two jobs, but their employers don't cover them with health insurance, so they have to go buy their own. After they get done with the big, beautiful bill, they've got to extend these tax credits so that working class people, when October hits and people get premium bills, we've got to make sure that they don't get sticker shock.
So that means that the second reconciliation. We've always talked about two reconciliation bills. I think those healthcare credits ought to be a part of reconciliation 2. If you want to learn more about those, head over to their website, stophealthcosthikes.com. It's there on the screen if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. Healthcosthikes.com. Americans for Balanced Budget, good group. Been at it a long time. They know of what they speak. John McLaughlin knows of what he speaks as well. Head on over there. While I am awaiting Mr. Drucker or Mr. Kovalaks, I'm not sure who's up next. Let me tell you, I've made the switch to Consumer Cellular, and I think you ought to as well. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. I noticed the savings. You will too, but I want you to notice what you are saving from. There is no reason for you not to have savings without sacrifice, but you ought to know how much your savings are. It takes about 20 minutes to switch, and you will get $25 off if you use my code HUGH25 when you make the switch. That's $5 off each of your first 5 monthly invoices. You can call 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. Remember my code HUGH25. Or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Now, what I want you to do before you do that is get out your cell phone bill or find it online if you're on auto pay and find out how much you are paying and for what you are getting for it. How much data are you buying? Are you on an unlimited plan that's costing you $150 a month because you've never even looked? You can get 2 lines if you're over 50. You can get 2 lines of unlimited data for $60 a month. All right, that's about as cheap as you can possibly want if you want unlimited data. Almost certainly you don't need unlimited data. You need 5 gigs or 10 gigs. Talk to the wonderful people, and I mean people based in America. Call them up, 800-411-4454, and say, okay, let's talk turkey. What do I need? Here's what I'm paying. But first thing first, get your pencil out, go through your invoices, find out what you are paying and how much data you are paying for, and then make the switch to Consumer Cellular. Keep your phone, keep your number, keep your data, or get something completely new. New device, whatever it is that you want. But give them a call because you should not be burning up money every month with Big Cellular. You just don't need to do that. Finally, as we wait for Mr. Drucker, let me tell you that the 4th of July would be better if you had a Best Hot Grill on your patio. We used the Best Hot Grill last night. Best burgers in America. Why? Because it takes about 30 seconds on the Best Hot Grill. Solaire infrared grills are the best grill made in America, and they are made in America. And they come in all sizes and all price levels, and you can try before you buy. You'll love the fact that the Solaire infrared grill goes to 1,000 degrees in a minute. And you will say to yourself, how does it do that? How in the world does it do that? Well, it's the technology. They've been working on it for a long time. They get better and better and better. These amazing USA-made grills have to be seen to really fully be appreciated, which is why BestHotGrill.com has a try it before you buy it. But mostly you'll see it in the first meal you cook on it, like we just had burgers last night. Nice summer meal out there on the patio. Give yourself a shot. Give yourself BestHotGrill.com and do it today. BestHotGrill.com. Coming right back, either with Drucker or Eddie Kovalek. I'm not sure. We'll find out. The one big beautiful bill has passed the United States Senate. Here to talk about what that means is David M. Drucker, senior political correspondent for the Dispatch. David, I'm a little bit surprised that it was 50-50, but it's passed with J.D. Vance providing the tie-breaking vote. Where now? I know it goes back to the House, but what do you think happens?
Well, look, I've always felt that this thing's going to pass one way or the other. I think the question is for those centrists among House Republicans, how do they react to some of the changes, especially dealing with the Medicaid reforms or the Medicaid cuts, depending on how you want to look at it. And then you have the fiscal hawks, and there are a lot of so-called fiscal hawks in the House Republican conference. They're not going to like this bill. They didn't like the bill they sent to the Senate in the first place. But it's either they live with this or they get nothing, meaning the bill would die. And so I think the question here is, do they put up a fight before they accept reality, or do they just accept reality to get it over with?
That is, I agree with you. That is the assessment. I have my opinion, but what's your opinion? Do they accept it and move it to the president's desk on July 4 and look for the next win, or do they try and have a symbolic Custer's last stand?
Really good question. I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of sound and fury over the next 48 to 72 hours, and then a reluctant, we'll just go along with it and pass it on July 4th. There is a chance, and I would, and I really wouldn't rule this out, that they can't get it done by July 4th, that it's just too bitter of a pill to swallow quickly, and that they hold out for this change or that change. It'll be interesting to see what they're hearing from like-minded senators. Hey, we passed this, but we were really hoping you'd deal with it. I think there were a lot of House Republicans, or not a lot, but at least some that passed it out of the House, but figured, let's see what the Senate does. So it's possible it could slip past July 4th. I've always looked at the August recess, the end of July, beginning of August, as the deadline that Republicans were going to meet, because I think this thing is going to pass and get to the president's desk. But there is some momentum here, and the way they look at it, as well, is, hey, if we get this thing done, because it's never going to be anywhere near to what we would like, let's just get it done now. We get our 4th of July holiday, and we can get onto the business of selling this thing, at least for those who want to sell it. And there are a fair amount of congressional Republicans that are going to want to sell this thing.
And there's a gamble involved in rejecting it or amending it and sending it back to the Senate. 50-50 doesn't mean a lot of movement. That's a very fragile house of cards. And it was a very fragile house of cards coming out of the House. I mean, does anyone really want to run that risk of a tax hike that big?
Well, it's not just that, Hugh. The way I've looked at this is House Republicans have thrown everything into this bill that they care about just about. It's like a policy omnibus bill. And so, what do you go to the voters with next year if you don't pass this? Because they could have worked on a whole bunch of this stuff outside of reconciliation, or they could have at least done two bills, two reconciliation bills, the way Senate Republicans wanted initially. And they might have been able to say to themselves, all right, we have time to work on this because we've got all this other stuff. But they've thrown it all in here. So if this thing, were to fail, they're really empty-handed next year, and I think Republican voters, would look at them and say, like, you couldn't do anything. What's the point of us even showing up? And so when you're looking at this bill, I think that the small majorities, in a sense, then work for the bill's passage, because everybody's on the hook if it fails, right? When you have a large majority, which it could make it easier in a sense, 10 or 20 members can say, hey, not my problem. You guys want it so bad, you do it, right? But here, 3 members hold out and the whole thing's dead. 4 members hold out, the whole thing's dead. So everybody's got to answer for it. And that, I think, is why it's been able to actually get to this point this quickly, because nobody could declare that it wasn't their responsibility. It's been everybody's responsibility.
So, David, you did remind me of something that matters a lot. When the initial jockeying was taking place in January, some senators said, let's go with 2 reconciliation bills. We can do that. I assume they can still do a second reconciliation bill. Can't they fob off the malcontents onto the second reconciliation bill and start to move that immediately?
I don't think so, because there's just not the bandwidth, right? Congress, it would seem like you can, and in theory you could, but the oxygen to do anything else other than focus on this is just completely Like there's no other mental or political bandwidth for House and Senate Republicans to do anything else. And so you have to clear the decks on this one before you get started on something else major, whether it's a reconciliation package or not. But you're right; they still can do a second reconciliation package. I always believe that they should have done the border reconciliation package separate. You move that first because it's something that everybody believes in, has the most broadly political buy-in across the political spectrum for voters. And it creates governing momentum. And then you deal with the sorts of things, entitlement programs, tax cuts, that are always political hot buttons that half the country's not going to like, depending on who the president is. But they chose to do it this way, thinking that it was just too heavy a lift to do things twice. So it actually will be interesting here to see what they do turn to next.
I do like the idea of too big to fail and putting it all in. Mostly, I like the idea of giving the economy a jolt so it has time to grow before we get into the next election cycle. Want to switch subjects on you, David, for a last question. June of 2025, if you include the first 3 days of July, is about as good a month politically as any president of my lifetime has ever had. Agree or disagree?
I don't know that I agree, but I don't necessarily disagree. It's just that you have to look at different presidents in different eras. I can remember a time when George Herbert Walker Bush was at 90% approval because of the Gulf War. I can think of George W. Bush immediately after 9/11. I can think of, I was a little young during the Reagan administration, but I remember him being president and he had some real high moments. Donald Trump has had some real high points at times. I think how he handled the Israeli-Iran conflict, getting involved at the very end to destroy or at least degrade Iran's nuclear weapons capabilities, is a high point. So this is not my way of saying, oh no, he's not having a good couple of days. I don't know that I would put it quite like that, just given the breadth of history and different presidents.
Go back and give it a think, because
moments.
I remember '89 when the wall fell, but except for that, we've had comeback weeks like after getting slammed on 9/11, but this is just a week of wins. David M. Drucker on X. Thank you, David. Time to take my relief factor. I got, again, like 0 miles in today because the back is still tricked out a little bit, but relief factor is coming to the rescue. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, omega. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you see me every time at this day. Take these 4 pills, which is pretty easy to do, because they are very carefully manufactured. They're the right amount of supplements. The only supplement I've taken for more than 20 years, the only one I intend to take, the one that makes it work for me, the one that keeps me going and moving up and down, up and down, up and down. I was carrying chairs today. Had some help, didn't do it by myself, but I was carrying chairs. I'm in my brand new studio chair, which is a lot more comfortable than the torture chair that was here, and that's good too. But I had to carry it down out of the Staples Center and into the car and all that different stuff. So I'm here to tell you, Relief Factor really does help. Whether you're carrying books, whether you're lifting chairs, whether or not you're doing your workout, it really does help. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or head over to their website, find the starter pack for $19.95, a 3-week starter supply that's less than $1 a day. All you have to do is find your way to relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Hit that starter pack, get on that program. You will thank me in about 3 weeks. You'll say, thank you, Hugh. Speaking of 3 weeks, that's how long it's going to feel like Dwayne's gone. He's going on vacation next week.
Yes.
And Generalissimo,
yes.
Where are you going?
Alaska.
Now, myphdweightloss.com is very big on salmon and king crab, right?
They do like fish, yes.
They fish. And what do they think of oysters?
Limited amounts, probably.
How about great white sharks? They're up there.
Do you eat great white sharks?
I don't know. Sometimes they eat you. I'm just wondering if they're on the MyPhD weight loss.
Well, I don't think I'm on the sharks' PhD weight loss diet.
Yeah, is orca on that menu? Because I don't want you to go fishing for orca.
I'm not going to go fishing for orca. You know what they also have? They have steak and chicken on the boat, too.
No, they don't.
Yes,
No,
they do.
It's an Alaska cruise. It's all king crab and salmon.
No,
Didn't anyone
that's
tell
not
you?
true. No, all the king crab flies south. That's it goes to the continental U.S.
864
644
1900 connects you to myphdweightloss.com, a program with which Dwayne lost 50 pounds of king crab and salmon over the course of 3 months, 2.5 years ago.
That's like saying that all Nebraskans eat okra.
Well, they do.
No, it goes everywhere. It goes everywhere else.
No, they eat it up there. They're okra people. But I want people to know myphdweightloss.com actually works. No fat shots, to quote the president.
No fat shots.
Just good old-fashioned smart nutrition with a counselor, and it works day in and day out, and you keep the weight off as Dwayne has, at least until he goes on a cruise. You know, they have cookies on cruises,
You see,
Dwayne.
that's got to be the hard part. Is I got to stay away.
They're
from all this
everywhere.
weight.
They're like landmines in
it's
Afghanistan.
Ubiquitous. It's
you
ubiquitous
do not
on
want.
the boat.
They're just everywhere. I should go along with you and protect you from them.
I will be well defensed.
All right. The only shoe that is left to drop is a cut in the Fed rates, because today the one big beautiful bill passed the Senate. This has been the greatest month that Donald Trump could possibly have asked for. All of June and the first day of July, if he gets the one big beautiful bill through the House one more time. I don't think a president had a month like this since 1989 in the fall of the Berlin Wall, or maybe 1991 with Desert Storm and the collapse of the Soviet Union. It has truly been a remarkable month, and they are this close to one big beautiful bill locking in the permanent tax cuts and meaning the American economy takes off. The one thing we're waiting for, Jerome Powell. Now, my friend Andrew Del Rey over at andrewandtodd.com, we always talk about whether or not the Fed's going to get in line, and that's because andrewandtodd.com lend you money to buy houses. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They are lenders. You need to call them at 888-888-1172 if you haven't already called them and got started on getting ready to finance. I think interest rates are going to fall. I think this bill is going to explode the economy, and I think that means increased productivity, and I think home building is going to take off, and I think there's pent-up demand. So once the Fed just gives people a little hope that the rates aren't going to stay stuck up there forever and they'll be able to refinance, I think Andrew and Todd are going to be as busy as possible. Now, remember, they're lenders. No matter what you are, whether you are a senior citizen, you want to get a reverse mortgage, get money out of your house, you can do it with andrewandtodd.com. If you're a veteran, you don't want to put any money down, you can do it with andrewandtodd.com. If you're a first-time home buyer, they are particularly useful to you. And some of you just want a home equity line of credit. You just want to have a standby in the event that something comes up and you don't want to have to go sell something in the stock market precipitously. You want to be able to take the money out of your house and put it back in when it makes sense to sell something. Then that's andrewandtodd.com. They do HELOCs as well. 888-888-1172. And the key thing to remember, if you have to move, go ahead. Get pre-qualified, find out how much money you can afford to put into a house, how much you're going to make on the sale of the house that you own, or if it's a first-time home buyer and you're doing FHA, what you've got to put down and what you get to get as a rate. But do it with Andrew and Todd, 888-888-1172. Don't wait another day. I want to go back to President Trump's press conference earlier today down at the Alligator Alcatraz. He talked about Prime Minister Netanyahu coming here on Monday, cut number 8.
How firm are you going to be with Netanyahu about ending the war in Gaza?
Very firm, very firm. But he wants it too. I will say he's coming here next week. He wants to end it too. We had a tremendous success with Iran. They won't have me. Somebody said, "When are you going to sign?" I said, "Sign? They are so bombed out." Did you see the report issued this morning? The place was decimated. It'll be years before anybody even gets down there.
I have to say, I think June 2025 is going to go down as one of the great months for a president. I'm joined now by Brett Baer, anchor of Special Report. You can watch tonight. I'll be joining Brett on the panel. Brett, as you look back over the presidents you've covered and the Pentagons you've covered, has anyone had a month like Trump in June 2025 has had?
No, I think this is one of his best, and one of the best I can remember covering for both international and domestic big wins. And, we don't know how they're all going to end up, but as far as weeks go, I can't think of a better one.
Yeah, our friend Matt Continetti, who's often on the panel with you, wrote a free press column today where he just listed bombed Iran's nuclear sites, brokered peace in Africa, got SCOTUS to rein in activist judges, forced China and Canada to bend on trade, border crossings down 93%, S&P 500 at record highs, and that was before the one big beautiful bill passed the Senate. I know we've had inspiring weeks before. W standing up on the fire truck after 9/11, rallying the country with his speech at the National Cathedral. We've had the collapse of communism, but this, in terms of both domestic and international policy, Trump's got to be on cloud nine.
Yeah, it's substantive. It's real. It's the ceasefire's holding. Rwanda and the Congo actually signing the deal. The big beautiful bill. We don't know what's happening in the House, but my bet is to not bet against the president. And if you look at all of that in the face of a lot of partisan pushback, it's pretty amazing.
Now, Brett, I want to put this in terms of golf for the benefit of our golfing audience. Right now, you're looking at a par 5, and you can try and hit that in 2. You take out your 3 wood, you can go, but there's water in front of it. So maybe you lay up and get close for a birdie putt, et cetera. The house has got to decide whether to go for it in 2 or to take the easy birdie. I want them to take the up and down vote and get this thing passed. What do you think they'll do? Would you go for the green in 2?
I've learned that that's not always the smart play. And even though, you feel like you have a chance, a lot of times it's all about percentages. And I have a feeling it's going to be a 3-shot hole. And they're going to take the wedge into the green and take the birdie. But, there are some go-getters in the House that want to make a name. And then you have the added, political element of Elon Musk saying he's going to primary some congressmen if they don't vote against the big beautiful bill after saying that they wanted to cut government.
If this cracks up, Brett, do you think they can put Humpty Dumpty back together again? I actually don't. I think if it cracks up, it's really difficult to do this again.
I agree. I don't think it can be. There's too many moving pieces. And then you go back to 2 bills, and you go back to, you go back to a long, long time into his second term that you're going to be getting a piece of legislation through.
I'm going to write up for FoxNews.com on Thursday. The one thing I think he can offer the deficit hawks, which is the right to write the second reconciliation bill. Just say to him, okay, you guys are the manager. Try and get whatever you can get through the House, and maybe it'll pass, maybe it won't, but we're going to give you the lead on this. Run with it. Because the deficit hawks have a lot of ideas, but they also run into the reality of their colleagues not really wanting to do what they want to do. But if you let them run that ball, don't they kind of own the opportunity to do so?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's also the opportunity to run point on some of these revision bills, the rescission from Doge, that they can try to get across the finish line in the House and the Senate, and those are separate of the budget reconciliation. So I think that's right.
Now, Brett, hardest question of all, and last one. Do you think we'll ever do entitlement reform in the United States? Ever?
I think we have to. I mean, eventually the ship of state has to turn just a little bit in order for us to avoid hitting the wall. And so there's going to have to be something. There's been many efforts. Simpson Bowles was one of the best. That was a bipartisan effort that President Obama didn't really take the baton there and run. But you're going to have to eventually because the years are ticking down for sustainability for those things.
There was the Greenspan Commission, which worked on Social Security under Reagan, and that's the last time I think something actually worked. And I really don't know when and how that's going to come around again. But you're right, we're on an unsustainable path. It just seems to me very difficult to imagine.
Well, it's going to have to be like the BRAC Commission, the base closings.
Yes.
You're going to have exactly that kind of format to be able to get, the tough vote. We're always one election away from dealing with the big thing. And so you're going to have to structure it differently.
And for the benefit of the Steelers fans, the BRAC commission is you send a blue ribbon panel away. They decide what bases to close. They bring it back for an up or down vote, no amendments. And they always pass. And there's always a lot of screaming. And that's what they need here is a bipartisan commission to come back with an up or down vote. That's actually, I may steal that from you, Brett. Put that in the Fox News column on Thursday. Brett Baer, I'll be seeing you tonight on Special Report at 6 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Don't go anywhere, America. When we come back, I'm going to talk oil facts. Oil facts. And when I talk oil facts, I mean, there are a lot of things. Landman has really changed the debate in this country, and it's rare for a television show to do it. But I think Billy Bob Thornton actually got into people's heads and made them think about the reality of a world without fossil fuels, which is not a world I want to live in, or you want to live in, or the developing world wants to live in. Oilfacts.com, brand new sponsor of the program. I'm very happy to have them here because ever since I saw Billy Bob Thornton lay down the law in Landman, I've been wanting someone to come along and do it in a news setting. And Ed Kovalaks is the guy to do that. He is our sponsor for the program. He's also the CEO of the Prairie Operating Group. Ed, welcome. Tell me how you got into oil facts, and do you agree with me that Billy Bob did more for the oil business than everybody else until now?
I can't tell you how many times I've been asked if that's what the business is really like. So he's definitely brought a lot of attention to it. But in all seriousness, being a proud member of the fossil fuel community, there's just been so much disinformation about fossil fuels spread that we felt like somebody had to go tell the truth about it. And that's really how oilfacts.com was born.
Well, I want to go to the most important thing right away, which is disasterism. Everyone says the climate is going to change and disaster deaths are going to go up. But in fact, had we not had the improvements brought about by fossil fuels over the last 150, 100, and 200 years, we would be much worse off today. You want to unpack that for people?
Yeah, look, I think we've got to stop selling fear and start selling facts. And so by definition, climate's always been changing since the inception of time. So it's real, but so is human ingenuity. That's just the facts. And so ever since the discovery of fossil fuels, there's actually been a 98% decrease in climate-related deaths over the last century, really facilitated by fossil fuels. So at the end of the day, fossil fuels really enable us to master climate and protect ourselves from climate. And interestingly, far more people have died in the last century and before that from extreme cold than extreme heat.
Oh, I didn't know that. But I was going to say, I don't think anyone's going to give up their air conditioning. I don't think anyone's going to give up their heaters. I don't think anyone wants to go back to living in a climate-only, non-managed climate setting. And that means fossil fuels. And so when you explain it to people this way, do you get traction? Do they begin to listen more closely about the facts about fossil fuels?
I can't tell you how many times I have conversations about this topic with people, and I get a lot of oh really, I didn't know that, surprising kind of reactions, because people don't know any of these things. And so it's hard to imagine us living without refrigeration and AC and heating, but half the world does because they don't have access to affordable, abundant fossil fuels. And so I'd like to think of ourselves as being on team human flourishing. We want everybody to enjoy the life that we do in the West.
Now, I also don't believe that developing countries, whether it's India or Africa or anywhere on the globe, if they're developing, I don't think they're going to give up their air conditioning and their gas-powered cars. I just don't think they're going to do it. At the same time, the market can do what the market will do vis-a-vis EVs. But I don't see, I think, in fact, the propaganda wall has been broken on this. Do you, Ed? Do you think that we've broken through the alarmism?
It feels like the pendulum is swinging towards reality, which is wonderful thing to see. But look, again, the developing world wants to develop into our lifestyle along the same means. And how do you think we got here? We got to where we are today on the back of fossil fuels. And so, the other really interesting component is that we know how to develop fossil fuels extremely cleanly in this country with a very low emissions profile. And that's something we're really proud of, and we can teach the rest of the world how to do the same.
Yeah, I've got Secretary Wright coming up, the Energy Secretary, in hour number 3. We're going to talk about what the One Big Beautiful Bill does for oil and gas. But I've had Doug Burgum on as well, and Doug's something of an acquaintance and a friend. If you get him going, he'll talk forever about carbon capture, and he'll even make it understandable for a journalist, which is saying something. But do you think we are going to be able to persuade significant majorities of Americans we can have it both ways? We can have both fossil fuels and less carbon in the atmosphere?
I'm not sure we need to convince them of that. And I'll tell you, ironically, where we operate in Colorado with our company Prairie Operating, we're surrounded by dairy farms, and I think we actually emit less carbon than the dairy farms around. So this whole notion of being completely focused on carbon is probably the wrong thing to focus on. Carbon capture is kind of an interesting neat thing, but at the end of the day, it's just government paying you to do something. There's no actual economic benefit to storing carbon in any way. So I'm not sure that technology really has legs.
Well, Doug Burgum believes in it, and he'll talk to you about it forever, but he also believes in nuclear power, and I want to make sure you're not opposed to any of the above, right? Your oil just needs to be part, and natural gas needs to be part of what we're doing.
Look, I'm a big proponent of energy addition. Demand for energy is growing every year, and that's being even more dramatically seen today with just the adoption of AI and the data center growth that you need to be able to empower AI. And so I'm an energy additionalist. I think you need every form of energy. I'm also a realist, and I know that you can't, overcome the laws of physics and thermodynamics. So no matter how much solar and wind you throw at the grid, you're not going to really increase power generation because those are low density fuel generation sources. Like eating salad is your only dietary staple. I am a big believer in nuclear. Nuclear is, besides fossil fuels, the only energy dense form of generation. But we're struggling in this country with adopting nuclear, and being a student of history, I just think it's going to take many, many decades to overcome the challenges to really get nuclear out there.
I think AI is going to drive it. I mean, if we want to stay ahead of the Chinese, we're just going to have to do AI, and we're going to have power of all sorts. Talk to me a little bit, if you can, about climate deaths, Ed, because you must shudder whenever we see a climate story. A heat wave, people expiring in their house because they don't have air conditioning, blame it on the climate. A cold snap, climate change is happening, people don't have enough heat in their cars, they die on the side of the road. You must shudder because climate deaths are down dramatically, decade over decade, century over century.
And not only that, but when we do encounter climate emergencies, when a hurricane hits, it's diesel trucks delivering aid, gas-powered generators keeping the lights on, and fossil fuels fueling resilience to climate disasters. So at the end of the day, without fossil fuels, again, we wouldn't be empowered to protect ourselves from climate. We're not going to change climate. I think we all need to get over that. It's a much bigger thing than we can actually control, but we can control the way we respond to it.
And we can get smart about oil facts. Go to oilfacts.com and get informed, get smart. Ed, thank you for joining me. Keep coming back. I very much appreciate having the energy industry and you behind the program because we are common sense conservatives here and we believe in flourishing. I love the fact you use that word because it takes energy. Energy is freedom, and we need a lot of it. We have a new sponsor, endthecableopoly.org, endthecableopoly.org, and to explain what that means, I'm pleased to welcome former FCC Chairman Ajit Pai, and I've been waiting to talk to Ajit ever since the Eagles pounded his Chiefs and the window began to close on the Chiefs. And I wanted to open up that way because the windows open up for the Browns now, Ajit, and now it's. I'm sorry your time's over, but I hope you enjoyed the run.
After all these years of urging your Browns on to glory, this is the thanks I get from the Open. That's tough. Tough crowd.
Well, let's agree on something. I'm very glad that the One Big Beautiful Bill includes a spectrum auction. Would you explain to people why that matters so much and how much money it will raise?
Oh, happy to. And thanks again for having me on. I've really admired your work over the years and our collaborative efforts at that time. But so in the One Big Beautiful Bill, one small but really outsized provision involves reestablishing the Federal Communications Commission's ability to auction off some of the spectrum that we use for our wireless phones and other devices every single day. That spectrum is finite. And in fact, as Senator Cruz, who is one of the leaders on this proposal, has pointed out, the federal government has something like 60% of the most usable spectrum, the airwaves, that consumers could use for 5G and other advanced wireless services. And so one of the things that the One Big Beautiful Bill does is reestablishing the FCC's auction authority to get some of that spectrum into the commercial sector, and also includes a pipeline, a very well-defined pipeline of spectrum bands that are going to be auctioned in a time certain over the next couple of years. That's so critical for a variety of reasons. Generates a ton of money for the United States Treasury, over $100 billion by many estimates, helps us keep the wireless innovation lead vis-a-vis China, and perhaps most importantly, keeps consumers on the cutting edge of wireless innovation. So it's a really important provision. I know we're debating a lot of other things in the One Big Beautiful Bill, but this is one that really deserves a lot of special attention.
Well, this has traditionally been a tug of war between free marketeers like yourself and the Department of Defense that wants to hoard the spectrum. Why are they overprotective of the spectrum, Ajit Pai?
Well, I think it's natural for any federal agency to be propelled by inertia, that they have a certain asset, whether tangible or intangible, and it's just easier in many cases to say we want to keep that asset, even if it's not being put to its highest valued use. And one of the things that was important to me in my new role is to really establish a collaborative framework that we could work with the Department of Defense and others on. And I've met with senior leaders at the Pentagon and the White House about this very issue. And one of the arguments I've made that I'm gratified that they have come around to is that wireless innovation is not just economic security, it's national security. Allowing wireless technologies to proliferate here in the United States will help our military have more of the tools that they need in order to keep our military primacy across the world. And the Chinese, for example, they're clearly putting a premium on wireless technology innovation, and they also are able to prioritize the People's Liberation Army, the needs that it has. And so just as the Chinese are able to walk and chew gum, I think we need to do that here in the United States. I'm grateful to the Department of Defense and others for working with us on this provision to get this into the bill.
Well, break this down even for a Steelers fan, Mr. Chairman. What does the spectrum mean vis-a-vis China? Because they are fully exploiting their spectrum. Are we in competition for the same spectrum with them, or do we have to have our own slice of the pie and they get their own slice of the pie?
Yeah, good question. So generally, spectrum is decided on a nation-by-nation basis. And so, for example, when I left the Trump administration in January of 2021, the United States was the world leader in 5G availability, and China was a distant 17th. Over the previous 4 years under the Biden administration, the FCC lost its authority to auction off some of this spectrum, and there wasn't a spectrum strategy. There were no spectrum auctions that were held, that were started, and so really we remained in stasis. As a result, today, China is actually leading in terms of mid-band spectrum. This is the airwaves that are most useful for 5G. And the United States is starting to slow down in terms of its own spectrum assets that are put to market. So one of the things that this provision does is not just reestablish the FCC's auction authority, but as I mentioned, that pipeline of 800 megahertz of spectrum that Senator Cruz and the president himself really fought for is going to give America one of the critical building blocks for wireless innovation. To build a wireless network, you need not just infrastructure, the towers and things like that. You also need a sufficient amount of those airwaves in order to allow wireless entrepreneurs to develop new cutting edge services. And so this is really going to help propel the United States over the next decade or two in terms of wireless innovation. And that is what leads capital and talent to develop here on our shores, as opposed to going to the communist Chinese.
Amen. And when 6G comes along, we'll be well positioned. Ajit Pai, keep coming back, Mr. Chairman. Always good to see you. Sorry about your Chiefs. That must still sting, but, I had to bring it up. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Remember, endthecableopoly.org. Haviv Redigur is the senior analyst for the Times of Israel, a monthly guest here since the long war began for Israel after October 7th, 2023. And we have not yet talked since Operation Rising Lion began and ended. Haviv, welcome back. Thank you for spending time with me. Big opening question. What is the impact of Operation Rising Lion on the general Israeli psyche, if you can even venture such a bold statement?
Yeah, that's an easy one. The war itself had tremendous support. Not all wars do. It depends a lot on whether there's a sense that they're successful, whether they're dragging. This was a war that the general Israeli population, I mean, huge majorities, think that Iran really does want to destroy them, wants to kill them, and the military forces, security forces pulled off some astonishing successes, very low cost. There have been something like 29 dead. There have been some buildings that fell from the larger rockets that Iran fired. Very low cost for Israel, very low cost for Iranian civilians, for example, considering what everyone thought this war would be, and tremendously successful targeting the regime. So it's I don't know how to put it. It's a thrill in the sense that all the bad things about a war are minimized, and the very thing we needed, which was the sense to explain to the enemy that they cannot have this sort of Damocles and promise of genocide hanging over us for a generation without us responding. Those things were achieved, and so tremendous, I think, sense of relief and sense of success.
So I asked Ambassador Oren the same thing yesterday, and he said he wrote a book about the 1967 war decades ago that said if you don't understand the 67 war, you won't understand the Middle East since then. Do you think this is a parallel event? If you don't understand the 12-day war, you're not going to understand the Middle East going forward?
I think so. In the run-up to the Six-Day War, to follow, Michael Oren has a doctorate from Princeton and wrote one of the great books. I mean, that is one of the great books on that war that people need to read from all sides. In other words, that's truly a great work of history. So just to pull from it a couple of things, in the run-up to the war, in the days before the war, everybody understood war was coming, and nobody really understood how strong Israel is. Israelis did not understand how strong they are. The enemy had roughly the same technological level. They got planes and tanks from the Soviets. And then the war happened, and there was this astonishing discovery of our strength and our resilience and our capability. And that kind of arc, before the 67 war, they dug mass graves in Tel Aviv in expectation of that many dead. Something like 13,000 graves were dug in the biggest public park in the city. And then to discover that actually we could defeat the Egyptians and the Syrians and the Jordanians all at once in 6 days was an amazing discovery for people who were just 19 years out of being refugees from a Holocaust, people who in the previous 19 years of Israel's existence had all fled or been forced to flee Iraq and Yemen and places like that. To suddenly discover that standing together on their own 2 feet, shoulder to shoulder, they were no longer vulnerable, and by their own strength and their own exertions. Iran has built an ideology of our destruction. It defines the regime. It spent hundreds of billions of dollars that the Iranian economy doesn't possess on our destruction. Our destruction had nothing to do with us. It has to do with an internal version of Shiism that this regime has tried to advance. And it's this big redemption arc of history that was going to prove that the regime is the redemption of Islam, blah, blah, blah. And they were coming for us, and we destroyed that capability and humiliated them in every way that they wanted to destroy us. And so, yes, there's absolutely that sense of coming out from a place of great danger to a kind of redemption.
Now, you take great... For a moment, I talked to Haviv before the program. I'll play more in the next segment. But I did want to talk to Dwayne for a moment about Dwayne's World. Dwayne, are you doing Dwayne's World today?
I am. I'm taping one with Jim Talent this afternoon.
Okay, so you will remember to begin by saying Hugh Hewitt has a YouTube channel, and we'd like you to like and subscribe to that.
Yes, since you have reminded me the last 2 days that you were.
I'm just making sure because we are 600 away from 90,000. That's it. So there got to be 600 people listening right now. We're just lazy, and if they get provoked by you or promoted by you, they might actually go to YouTube and hit that button. Now, I wanted to play for our audience my favorite Democrat, Stephen Smith, ESPN fame.
He's gradually consuming the red pill week by week.
Yeah, no, he's going to run as a Democrat for president, I think. Cut number 21 on New York City if they vote for Mr. Mamdani, Stephen A. Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me be very, very clear. If the Democratic Party becomes the likes of Zoran Mamdani, who, by the way, I like, I'm not trying to throw any shade on him or anything like that, but if the Democratic Party becomes him, you have no chance. You have no chance on a national basis in terms of the presidency. In Senate seats in the House, you have no chance. You have no chance. I want to be very, very clear about that. You might have a Democratic Socialist sprinkled here and there, but that ain't what America is. America's about capitalism. America's about dollars and cents. America's about an economy, a flourishing economy. Okay? And you know what it's not about? Free stuff. Somebody got to say.
You know, that man is not a Democrat. I know he says he's a Democrat, but he's not a Democrat. He's a Republican because Democrats think it is about free stuff. Relief Factor isn't free, but boy, does it work. This is the Relief Factor studio. I took it in hour number 1. I remind you about it every single hour of every single day. I've taken it for more than 10 years. I get 12 years now. The only supplement I've taken for more than 20 years. Why? Because I've been blessed with pretty good health and I stay in pretty good shape. I do have an occasional tweak on the lower back. I'm getting over one of those right now with the help of ReliefFactor.com, but it does work. And whenever I get one of those, I just double down, triple down sometimes the number of Relief Factor packets I take. If you go and order the starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day, you'll get a 3-week supply. The first week you take 3 packets a day, the second week 2, the next week 1, and thereafter just 1 a day will keep the levels of Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega up in your body, supporting your body's natural anti-inflammatory system. So get rid of the minor aches and pains that impede just your wonderful enjoyment of life, especially in the summer. Summer is here. We're all enjoying summer, even those of us with mosquitoes nearby. And no matter where you are, Relief Factor will make it better because you can even outrun the mosquitoes. Coming right back with more of Aviv Rettig-Gur and my interview taped earlier today, all of which is over at YouTube, which I wish when you go to listen to Aviv Uninterrupted, you like and subscribe to that YouTube channel, the Hugh Hewitt YouTube channel that Dwayne never mentions on Dwayne's World. One big beautiful bill headed to the House. We'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted on that. Earlier today, I talked with Aviv Rettig-Gur, senior correspondent for the Times of Israel, about the 12-day war and much else. Let's go back to part 2 of that. Now, you take great lengths to put yourself in the boots of other people who are not necessarily friends of Israel or at least not allies of Israel. Can you imagine what Khamenei and his remaining clerics and generals are thinking right now? What do you think they must be considering their new situation in the world?
You know, at first I thought they must be just terribly humiliated. We did way too well in this war. We decapitated their security services, shattered. You know, the Israeli planes were in the skies over Iran, casually bombing the nuclear program and the missile factories. I mean, the casualness of it, because they had nothing that could seriously compete. We did not understand that Israeli planes had that capability until the last few months. We saw it first last October, but we really, truly did not understand just how advanced the Israeli Air Force was compared to the Iranians. And I thought, you know, they must just feel terribly humiliated. I mean, this undermines what the regime has posited as its raison d'etre, as its validation and justification for being essentially a dictatorship. And I have since come to another view from essentially listening to some very wise Shiites. And I have a podcast episode coming out soon in an interview with one of them, Hussein Abdul Hussein, where Iran's regime is a kind of revolution within Shia Islam. that argues Shiites were always peaceful. They were always a minority in the Arab world. And so Arab Shia tended to always be, as minorities often are, not imperialist conquerors, but peaceful and preferring peace and avoiding political fights and avoiding political power, like the Druze and like the Alawites and like other minorities in the Middle East, and frankly, like Jews right up until the 20th century when they didn't have that option anymore. And Iran changed that. This regime is Shia imperialism that has adopted into Shiism, brought into Shiism from Sunni radicalism, from Sayyid Qutb. Ali Khamenei, the current supreme leader of Iran, translated the works of Ali Khamenei, of Sayyid Qutb, the man who is the intellectual inspiration for Al-Qaeda, from Sunni Islam into Persian for use in Farsi, in this new Shiism that they invented. I have started to come to the belief that their great problem, they're not, it's not about us, it's not about being humiliated with us. They took Shiism and took it from a peaceful religion to a warmongering, conquering, imperialist one, and that crashed and burned and was defeated by, the worst possible person to have defeated them, which is the Jews. And I think that in the internal discussion among Shia, the Persians have screwed this up for the Shia. And now I think that we're going to see, we've had 46 years of Iran pushing into Arab Shia communities, imposing themselves on Lebanese Shia through Hezbollah, imposing themselves on the Shia in Iraq. And now we're going to see a resurgence of Arab Shiism, which has always not been that conquering imperialism, and it's going to push back against the Iranians. So I think that there's...
We can only hope as much. I will be back with more of the Haviv Ratigur interview, all of which is posted at my YouTube channel, which I would like you to like and subscribe as well when you go and watch it uninterrupted. I'm very excited about my next guest because you've heard me say it 1,000 times in the 25 years this show's been on the air. Energy is freedom. The more energy we have, the more freedom we can possess. Energy Secretary Chris Wright joins me. He's new at the Department of Energy. First time he's been a guest on my show. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Great to have you. What did we win in the one big, beautiful bill today in the Senate for the energy business?
Simply a tremendous pivot in American energy policy. We've had the wind subsidies begin in 1992, 33 years ago. They've been extended 11 times. The solar subsidies are only 20 plus years old, but these have been around a long time. They've cost Americans hundreds of billions of dollars. And what did we get for those wonderful subsidies? We got more expensive electricity and less stable grids. This is the pivot. The president and this one big beautiful bill ends wind and solar subsidies. We're going to save the American taxpayers, the estimated numbers, $500 billion over the next 10 years in reduced subsidies, and get lower cost electricity and less pressure on the stability of our electricity grids. There's many other beautiful things in this bill, but it is truly a pivot in American energy policy.
Now, Mr. Secretary, when I sit down with your colleague on the Energy Domination Council, Doug Burgum, he talks about the needs that AI have if we want to be an AI leader. Does the big, beautiful bill do anything about increasing our baseload capacity?
Absolutely. Number one of the things that's hurt baseload capacity is paying and subsidizing to put on intermittent sources. When the sun's out, the base capacity's got to turn down. When the sun goes behind a cloud, it's got to turn back up. It's got to turn down again. So the more intermittent sources you have on your grid, the harder it is to operate the whole grid and the harder it is to run baseload power. If you remove those subsidies, what's going to get built going forward now is going to be reliable, dispatchable power. The fastest growing source of energy in the world and the biggest source of electricity in the United States by far is natural gas. This removes a lot of the burden on natural gas, where we will see a flood of new natural gas power plants being built, and peaker plants that right now are turning up and down all the time will convert to more baseload plants. So yes, this is a critical step in releasing that. And for next generation energy, the tax credits remain. They have an end date. That's critical for me. But the tax credits for geothermal, for hydro, and for nuclear, I don't like subsidies, but these are for baseload power technologies that we want to see launch so they can support in addition to the natural gas and existing coal plants we have. A lot of good stuff for energy in this bill.
Mr. Secretary, if you come on 5 times, if you come on 50 times over the next 4 years, I'm going to ask you every time about small modular reactors because I think they're the future of freedom on the planet. How does the bill either advance or say nothing about SMRs?
So the bill has several things that are helpful for SMRs. One is that there is a production tax credit for SMRs that's going to help the economics of these new plants for the first bunch of years, but not forever. You saw the president and the administration, we had 4 executive orders on nuclear energy that are going to streamline permitting reform through the NRC. At the Department of Energy, we will have test reactors, SMRs, at our Idaho National Lab running within 12 months from today. So yes, look, like you, I was a board member of a small modular reactor company before I took the new job. So I'm all in on nuclear, both large-scale nuclear and SMRs. And there's a lot of exciting stuff going on there. We're going to see shovels in the
fabulous.
ground.
Now, Mr. Secretary, a lot of people don't know this. Department of Energy actually runs the national labs you just referenced, and you take care of our nuclear stockpile. Does the bill provide funding for updating and testing of that nuclear stockpile and of our national labs?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the critical things is a lot of the infrastructure we use to build and maintain our nuclear weapons was built during World War II and immediately after World War II. So there's a lot of money in the one big beautiful bill to upgrade a lot of that very old infrastructure into more modern infrastructure. There's also some funds to accelerate the rolling out of next generation as we're replacing our older weapons designs with new weapons designs. And there's money in the one big beautiful bill for driving an effort that I'm a big champion of for using AI for national security. We hear about AI for business and consumers, and a separate bucket, AI for science, for advancing science so we can advance drug discovery, we can harness fusion energy, and we can drive science faster in the United States. These extra special AI buckets sounds like I'm a big government liberal. Total expenditure at the Department of Energy will be down meaningfully. We're just getting rid of expenditure on the less productive, the political nonsense, and more spending on hard science, more spending on modernizing our nuclear weapons and keeping our stockpile safe. But our overall budget's down.
If you're just tuning in, I'm talking with our Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright. He's an MIT guy, but he talks for the Steelers people. He makes it very, very understandable for the Steelers people out there. Mr. Secretary, pipelines, permitting for them has been nightmarish over the last 10 years. Is there anything in the big, beautiful bill, anything that you can do to advance pipeline construction in America?
A lot of exciting things there to do. Another thing that dropped today is NEPA reform. I don't know if everyone's followed that, but we had a Supreme Court decision 8-0 saying NEPA should go back to what NEPA is supposed to do. That Supreme Court effort was separate than what we're doing at the departments. But we released today the Department of Energy's revised NEPA guidelines. And they're not a multi-year torture test now. They're in line with what NEPA was intended to do. Big picture environmental checks. But they're about environment and checking things. They're not about bureaucracy and stopping things from happening. This NEPA reform is a big deal for building pipelines. We've also gone back to regular lease sales on federal lands. The elevated royalty rates paid from the Biden administration, they jammed through in the IRA, which was just to make it less attractive to drill for oil and gas. We've restored those royalty rates back to where they were for 100 years. So there's a lot of things that just getting the nonsense out of the way and getting the cobwebs out of the way, Hugh, and unleashing American energy again.
I am a retired land use lawyer, so I'm glad that NEPA was around when I had to pay for college tuition because it certainly did make every project much more difficult. But on behalf of all Americans, I want to say thank you. Mr. Secretary, what about energy production overall? Are we going to increase our exports and thus make our balance of trade sheet better?
Absolutely. Natural gas or liquefied natural gas exports, one of the biggest exports the United States has and our fastest growing export. Since President Trump came into office, we at the Department of Energy have approved 100 million tons per annum. If you're in the gas world, that's about 13, 14 BCF a day of additional gas export terminals. That alone would roughly double our exports from where we are today And there's another slice that's in construction today. So we will massively grow our natural gas exports out of the country. U.S. has incredible advantage there. We will continue to grow our oil exports out of this country. And we're going to build a massive pipeline from the North Slope of Alaska down to where the population center is in Alaska, bring low-cost energy literally to the citizens of Alaska. And I think you'll see a very large liquefied natural gas export terminal in Alaska, very geographically desirable for Japan, for Korea, for Taiwan, and great American allies on the Asian rim there.
Last question, Mr. Secretary. California announced plans to either shut down one and possibly two of their refineries. Do we have refining capacity in the United States? Are you working on this issue set as well?
We are as well. Part of that is just being more reasonable regulation for our existing refineries, which have plenty of projects to upgrade their throughput. And we're also in discussion with a group right now that for the first time has got a permit to build a new refinery in the United States. If built, it would be in South Texas. It would be the first new refinery built in America in 50 years. But common sense, when you bring common sense back to government, a lot of capital flows, a lot of things get built, a lot of jobs and opportunity for Americans, and stop the upward price pressure.
Why is that? We've only got a minute, but why have we not built a refinery in 50 years?
Our environmental regulations, and NEPA was one of them, became so hard to permit anything. If you already had an existing refinery, they'd layer pieces of regulations on. But to get a refinery permitted in the United States, extremely difficult. So no one tried for a few decades. We've gone to a different crude source. We produce a lower viscosity, higher quality, so-called light sweet crude these days. And we export a lot of it because we built our refineries for a different crude grade. Now, look, we have a great refining infrastructure, still the best and biggest in the world, but China's catching up there. And I'd certainly love to see another refinery built in the United States.
Bravo to that. Energy Secretary Chris Wright, thank you for joining me. Keep coming back, updating us all the time on small modular reactors, on natural gas exports, on everything you're doing, all of the above. Great start for Trump term 2 over DOE. Thank you, Secretary Wright. Byron York joins me. He is the chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. He's also a Fox News contributor along with me. Byron, I want to read you a condensed ex-post by Matt Continetti, our friend who writes for the Free Press. He notes that in the last month, Donald Trump bombed Iran's nuclear sites. He brokered peace in Africa. He got SCOTUS to rein in activist judges. He forced China and Canada to bend to our trade policies. Border crossings are down 93%, effectively closed. S&P 500 at the record high, and the one big beautiful bill got through the Senate. I'm having a tough time coming up with a better month for a president in this century. Can you?
I cannot think of one, and don't forget he actually got NATO to live up to its promises to pay for their own defense more. You remember back in the first campaign, 2016, Trump would tell audiences, you're going to win so much, you're going to get tired of winning. You're going to say, Mr. President, we're tired of winning, but we'll never get tired. And that was one of the things that helped him get elected. And when things didn't go well for him, like after he was president and he was indicted and convicted, the left had a lot of fun saying, well, are you tired of winning yet? Well, now he's president again, and you're right. This is an extraordinary string of victories, and I think it also, just the sheer momentum of it, makes it even less likely. I never thought it was very likely, but even less likely that any conservative Republican in the House of Representatives is going to say, you know, I think I would like to stand up and sink Trump's presidency. And by the way, my own political career. I don't see that happening.
That brings us to the one big beautiful bill. I think that Speaker Johnson ought to just put it on the floor, push it through the Rules Committee, put it down there for a vote, and tell people we can do a second reconciliation, but we're voting on this right now so America's economy can get some traction based upon certainty in the tax code. Is that the plan?
Well, you know, there are a lot of lawmakers who say, look, I know there's a lot of stuff in the bill, but the big thing for me is if we don't pass this bill, taxes are going to rise by a huge amount for middle class Americans. And this is just not acceptable, not possible. So, I think if only for that single provision, it would have enough Republican support to pass. I mean, the interesting thing about the bill is if you're a Republican looking at this, it's kind of like the embodiment of everything Donald Trump has done legislatively for the last 8 years, because it would make permanent the premier legislative accomplishment of his first term, which was the tax cuts. It would fulfill the largest unfulfilled promise of the first term, which was the border wall, and it would add other border security to that. It would keep promises from the 2024 campaign, like no taxes on tips. I mean, this is kind of everything. When Trump calls it one big beautiful bill, he was really referring to the fact that it's kind of everything rolled up into one. And given the fact that up until now, for 5 months, Trump's accomplishments, and there have been many, have all been achieved through his exercise of executive authority. This is the big legislative thing. And the pressure on Republicans, some of whom might not really like some of the parts of this bill, I think the pressure on them to vote for it just simply cannot be resisted.
Now, I know we've got a congressman from Kentucky whose name must not be mentioned because he's not really a Republican, is going to vote against the bill. But and I know Congressman Bacon has announced his retirement, but I can't imagine anybody wants to go out as the author of a massive tax hike. I mean, I don't see anyone voting against it. They might not like parts of it, they might love parts of it, but I would just put it out there immediately. And I wouldn't even whip the vote. I'd just say, this is so obvious. Are you going to shoot yourself in the foot? Or are we going to get the American economy going?
Right. It's like the Senate just passed this bill. All we have to do is pass it, and it goes to the president's desk. Okay? House and Senate have to pass the same bill. Let's do it. There's something going on, a dynamic behind the scenes that is different from what I had originally thought. I talked to Trump in, I think it was mid-March, when this process was kind of beginning. And there had just been a vote, one of these votes, to enable the House to go forward with something or the other. And there was a lot of talk about the usual suspects opposing the bill in the House. And without their support, it would not pass because the Republicans' margin was so narrow. And so Trump told me, he said, the leadership called up and they said, there are 10 votes. And they're hard no's. I mean, they are absolutely dead set against this. They are no, and they're not going to change their mind. But still, could you give them a call? And Trump says, okay. Calls up lawmaker number one. Before he even says why he's calling, lawmaker number one says, Mr. President, you got my vote. I'm with you 100%.
Huh?
And Trump said, oh, that's great. Thanks. Calls up lawmaker number two. Trump doesn't say anything. Lawmaker number two says, Mr. President, I'm with you all the way. I support you. You got my vote. And Trump's thinking, wow, this is interesting. Calls them all up, and they're all going to vote for him. And indeed, they all did. And so I said to Trump, I said, wow, I was looking at this from the outside, and I thought you must have been really twisting some arms. And he said, no. He said, they just wanted to be talked to.
Well, and there's also, that's the velvet glove. The Iron Fist is Chris LaCivita bringing the heat in Kentucky against the man who must not be named. I mean, that is kind of a dry run for anyone who sinks the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah, and now I will say the man from Kentucky who cannot be named is just unusual in the House. And Trump said even then, he said, I've totally given up on this guy. He's a grandstander. He's a total loser, and I'm just not even going to call him. And he wasn't one of those that the president called.
And there's no point. If you want to be irrelevant, he successfully made himself irrelevant. Let me close by underscoring the Supreme Court, because Matt mentioned it. Not many people have paid much attention to Mahmoud versus Taylor, which was the Montgomery County public school system, because everyone was doing a victory dance on the universal injunction. But Byron, that was a big deal. Parents are back in charge in classroom. And did you see the University of Pennsylvania apologize to all women swimmers in order to settle their Title IX problem?
I just saw that. And, the Leah Thomas case was a case that really galvanized public opinion, especially when they saw the winners stand with the first, second, and third winners in the women's swimming event. And you've got this big man standing there with, the swimmer's body, big shoulders, really muscular. And you've got these two women who are accomplished swimmers, but they're women. And, you just looked at that and said, this is not fair. I mean, this is just not right. And I think that photo alone changed a lot of the debate in this.
And there's a photo like that in the state of Maine with high school pole vaulters doing the same thing. And it's as though God favors Donald Trump when it comes to the issue sets that present itself during his tenure. Byron York, follow him on X, watch him on Fox News, read him in the Washington Examiner, listen to him every week right here. Thank you, Byron. Byron York on X. Earlier today, I taped an interview with the Times of Israel's senior analyst, Haviv Rettig Gur, whose Ask Haviv Anything podcast is must listening. We talked about the war, the 12-day war, and then we talked about anti-Semitism. Let's go to part 3 of the interview with Haviv.
That intra-Shia tension and contest, and I welcome it. I welcome it because I think we can make a lot of peace with a lot of Shia in the Middle East.
Interesting reference to Khatub. All I know about Khatub is what I read in The Looming Tower by Lawrence Wright, but I know that he went down fighting. He refused to treat with Sadat. He was hung by the neck until dead because he would not agree to anything. I imagine that's the Ayatollah Khamenei, but what I've been wondering about, Khrushchev was the supreme leader of the Soviet Union until one day he woke up and he wasn't, when the Soviet Union got tired of his antics and bringing them to the brink of destruction. Do you think that risk exists in a battered regime for Khamenei?
This is not my expertise. My guess from watching them just as a journalist for many years is no. And if I think there are a great many people in the regime who think that the clerics generally have failed them. A lot of generals in the IRGC, a lot of people who are in the military side of Iran think that the clerics have led them into this humiliation and this collapse, and the economy is just doing catastrophically, and people are going hungry in one of the richest countries in the world with 10% of the world's oil. And so there's a sense of real deep failure by Khamenei himself and also the entire clerical elite that he leads. However, for everyone right now in power, the IRGC itself as a separate military, Khamenei is the symbol around which everyone organizes. If he falls, those generals fall as well, or at least a new instability comes in where nobody's quite clear. Khamenei represents the religious justification. He's the cleric in charge who is the deputy of the Messiah, the Mahdi who's to come. That is how Khomeini, his predecessor, defined the position of supreme leader. And if he falls, a lot of the internal regime story of its own validity, which is a religious validity, will fall with him. So I suspect that no matter how much the generals are angry and frustrated and even enraged that he led this profoundly ridiculous, incompetent, and wasteful imperialist foreign policy that only hurt Iran and bankrupted Iran, and then failed to actually hurt the Jews, no matter how much rage they have, if he falls, they do, and so they'll try and keep him in power.
Well, the only counter-argument I can offer is that the IRGC generals look at the Ba'athist regimes that have fallen in Iraq and Syria. They had pretty good runs as police states. If they're willing to accept a police state that stays within its borders, there's no reason that the IRGC can't be rich and happy and stop threatening Israel and therefore stop funding proxies. I know it's a choice. It's an unlikely choice. But I like to think it's possible. And I don't know if anyone's talking about it in Israel. I don't know how you would notice it if they were trying to scale down. But has the regime's rhetoric, in your view, moderated at all since the shellacking they got in June?
The regime's rhetoric has not moderated one bit, including issuing a fatwa to kill President Donald Trump. But I would say that the regime's rhetoric has turned inward. In other words, what they're worried about now, for example, they did a great victory march, but at the victory march, they announced that all kinds of crazy, ridiculous things are now said on state media in Iran. A third of Tel Aviv is burned to the ground, and 1,000 Israelis are dead, and all these things that are just they're signals of the scale of the humiliation and the scale of the political problem internally that this failure at war really means for that regime. So, no, it absolutely. When they were confident, we were the target of their insane rhetoric. Now that they're very fragile and feel very much beaten, the internal people of Iran are the target of that rhetoric. And so the rhetoric has changed, but it hasn't moderated. But to your point about how the military, all it would have to do was just be satisfied with running Iran, and then it could just live forever, and everybody would buy their oil, and they would be a rich country and have a great time. There's nothing about Iran that prevents it from being a Saudi Arabia. In terms of wealth, in terms of stability, in terms of religious government. Like, they can have it all if they just stop trying to conquer everybody. And the simple answer is absolutely there are those kinds of questions being asked in Israel, but there are also those kinds of voices being raised within Iran's own ruling regime itself. We are seeing from the outside, there's talk about this in the intelligence services, and there's talk about this in the West, in Israel, and there's also talk about this at think tanks that follow this stuff very closely, that the tension that I mentioned between the generals and the clerics is very real. And for the clerics' fantasies, Iran has actually sacrificed a lot. And if that can be changed into what is basically just a military regime, everything would have gone better, and there would have been much lower cost, and Iran would be in a much better
And we can pray that that's going to happen. All of the interview with Haviv Rettig-Gur is now posted at my YouTube channel. I'd encourage you to go there and like and subscribe as well, but watch the whole thing. Nobody better than Haviv. I got to tell you, occasionally a post hits me between the eyes during the show, because I keep my eyes on what's going on in the news. And Jonathan Lemire used to be with the AP. I believe he was their White House correspondent. Then he gradually became an MSNBC guy, and now I think he's full-time MSNBC and co-hosts Morning Joe. And there are pressures at MSNBC. I know, I did 4 years before the mass at MSNBC. And if you live in the blue bubble, you tend to get a lot of blue bubble takes. And unless you're someone like me who's believed what I believe since I was 14, I'm not changing. I've never changed what I believe. I've always been an anti-communist, evangelical, Roman Catholic, Presbyterian. I just believe in the Constitution, separation of powers, strong foreign policy, peace through strength, Nixon, Reagan, WHW, Trump. They're all pretty good by me. But I also don't think Democrats are evil. I think Mr. Mamdani might do a lot of damage since he's a communist. By the way, Donald Trump, I'll do the Lemire post first. Jonathan Lemire posted 8 minutes ago. The bill will kill tens of thousands of Americans and impoverish millions more to grant million-dollar tax cuts to Trump and other billionaires. It will gut the ACA, and it will do nothing to solve the cost of living crisis that propelled Trump into office. Now, if this was a sentence, if I was diagramming the sentence, I guess it would just be a run-on sentence. Let's just take it one at a time. The bill will kill tens of thousands of Americans. All right. How many of you people think that's real? How many of you people think this bill will kill any Americans? I suppose somebody has produced a study saying that a marginal decrease in able-bodied participants in Medicaid will result in their getting hit on the way to work. I don't know. But I don't know how the bill's going to kill any Americans, much less tens of thousands. That's quite a claim for a bill to kill tens of thousands of Americans. And impoverish millions more. Impoverish. That means go below the poverty line because of this bill, which prevents a massive tax increase, which in fact would destroy lots of businesses and impoverish lots of people. In order to grant million-dollar tax cuts to Trump and other billionaires, I suppose that keeping the tax rates steady at where they have been for the past 10 years benefits everyone who would be harmed by raising the tax rates. But I don't want to raise the tax rates because I believe capital is mobile and capital is going to flee New York if Mr. Mamdani wins, and capital is going to flee the United States if we go confiscatory on capital taxation. And I believe that the private sector is actually the genius of America and the engine that drives growth and prosperity all the way around. It will gut the ACA. Now, the ACA is Obamacare. I followed it pretty closely all these many years. I don't know how this remotely guts Obamacare. Now, I'm not on Obamacare, so I don't know if the websites are shutting down tomorrow. I don't think so. I think we would have heard about that. I think these are talking points, unverifiable, completely unsupported by the facts, irrelevant, actually, to the argument, but it's coming from an MSNBC host. Finally, it will do nothing to solve the cost of living crisis that propelled Trump into office. All right, I wish I had a cleaned up version of the Billy Bob Thornton monologue from Landman. Now, we can't actually beep out everything he said, but he tried to explain to a hotshot lawyer how oil and fossil fuels are in everything. You're listening to fossil fuels right now. If you're in a car, you're driving fossil fuels. I don't mean the gas. I mean the car that you're driving. If you're wearing clothes, you're wearing fossil fuels. Everything comes back to oil and natural gas energy. Now, it's nice to have all of the above, and I want small modular reactors. I'm concerned about climate change. I'd rather produce more energy in a clean and efficient fashion than not. But I also happen to know that the cost of living crisis was caused by inflation and by soaring gasoline prices and soaring oil prices, which will and have begun to come down in every place except California, which arbitrarily keeps them high. And I know that if we have a housing crisis, the way to bring down the cost of the house is to build more houses. And to build more houses more economically, you have to drive down the cost of producing everything that goes into the house, while also reducing the size of government. So I don't think Jonathan wrote anything that's true here. He links to an Atlantic article, which I'm not going to bother reading. I think the Atlantic has lost its way. I've long supported it. I've long subscribed to it. But they've simply become a reflexively anti-Trump vehicle. And it's the same set of articles every month. But I really must say, the bill will kill tens of thousands of Americans. The bill will kill tens of, I mean, how does anyone even write something that stupid? The bill will kill tens of thousands of Americans. If you're a journalist, I mean. If you're a democratic socialist, left-wing nutter, and you might actually believe that if you're with Antifa, but Jonathan Lemire is a smart guy. He knows that's not true. He knows that's not true. I can't get over it. The bill will kill tens of thousands of Americans. And that's MSNBC. And realize about 500,000 people a morning, I don't know how many people watch Morning Joe, are getting that pumped right into their veins. No wonder. Gallup came out with the Are You Proud to Be American survey. 92% of Republicans are proud to be an American. Only 36% of Democrats are proud to be an American. Do you know why? Because they're feeding poison into the brains of young Democrats, such as a widely popular bill put forward by a president who won a landslide election is getting passed pursuant to the same rules that Joe Biden used not once but twice, and it's going to kill tens of thousands of Americans. It's the stupidest thing I've read all day, and I wanted to share it with you. Inside the Relief Factor studio, reminding you, as I do every hour, if you are not yet a Relief Factor user, go to 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. Call them up. Tell them, hey, I want that starter pack. I've heard Hewitt talking about it for 12 years now, and he finally persuaded me. It does work that way. Eventually, that's what causes earthquakes. Pressure builds up, and so the pressure in your will be relieved when you finally get the Relief Factor and figure out you should have been taking it 12 years ago when I first told you about it. I carry in curcumin and resveratrol omega. The only supplement I've taken for more than 20 years is the Relief Factor packet every day. And I do that because I do typically get my miles in, although June, though it was a month of great accomplishment for President Trump, might have been my lowest month in miles in 10 years. I really fell off the map because of pulling my back. But I'm getting back, and I'll be back in the game before much longer because of Relief Factor. It does indeed work. When you call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, ask for the starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day. Or simply go and find the starter pack, 3-week supply, $19.95, at their website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Let me just review. We had a great show today with Noah Rothman and Byron York and David Drucker and Brett Baer, all talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill. I'm going to be on Special Report talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill with Brett Baer and a couple other fun people on the panel tonight, so I hope you tune in. It's a big day in Washington, D.C. It's a big day for the country. I'm still getting over Jonathan Lemire. The bill will kill tens of thousands of Americans. That's just so dumb. I really do think, whenever you think there's a floor off of which MSNBC can't fall, they dig a hole and they fall into it. And Jonathan, tens of thousands of people. What is the point of scaring people that way, or trying to, other than destroying your own credibility? In all my days, I've never said anything that dumb. And I've been on the air since 1990. So I don't think I've ever even come close to anything that dumb. But it really is that dumb. Also want to remind you, if you want a good overview of what's going on in Israel right now and how Israel views the world, my interview with Haviv Rettig-Gur, which I taped right before the show, is about 35 minutes long. I played most of it over the course of the 3 hours. If you want to settle down and watch the whole thing, head over to YouTube and Hugh Hewitt, the channel. I would love it if you would like and subscribe that. I need 600 more of you folks, our good friends out there in radio and television land, watching on the Salem News Channel, listening on one of our affiliates, to remember when you go home, I'm nagging you. I'd like to get to 90,000 to pump the algorithm. Then I'll leave you alone to within spitting distance of 100,000. But I really would appreciate that. And I'd like you to listen to Haviv, because Haviv always brings his conversation today about the failings of the IDF at the Gaza aid stations. I like when I hear someone take a position contrary to what their country would like said about their country, because it's important for credibility, and Haviv's got buckets of it. And I would encourage you to listen to Ask Haviv Anything and my interview with him today.